Exodus, return to the promised land. I guess my sound was working back there. Lesson 13, when you're talking about the Passover, last week, or last time, Exodus 11:1, which reads, "The Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you out of here." And last time we talked about that 10th plague, which was the death of the firstborn, and we talked about the firstborn and the position of the firstborn and why that was important and so on. But as you're reading to the 11th chapter of the book of Exodus, it'll get to that point, and then all of a sudden it'll shift gears when it goes into the 12th chapter, and I skipped over that and finished up about the 10th plague so that we could cover the Passover tonight is what's in between that. So, what was the 10th plague? The 10th plague was the death of the firstborn. What was important to the firstborn? The firstborn was, if the father of the family died, the firstborn was the one that was responsible for the family. He got a double inheritance, but he was responsible for all the rest of the family, for all the unmarried sisters and so on. So he took over the place. So you could pass down from lineage to lineage, from one line to the next line to the next line to the next line. So it'd be the firstborn. What was Jesus and his family? He was the firstborn, so that has significance, which we won't get into tonight. So, 11:9, it says, "The Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let the Israelites go out of his land." And I put in the Torah, it's what we call the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. In the Torah, it's interrupted here between the 9th and the 10th plague to discuss the Passover. Nobody knows why it was done like that, but that's the way it is in our Bible, so that's the way that we have it. So why was it interrupted? I've got a quote here. "The purpose in the Exodus is not only freedom. Freedom alone gives license and results in anarchy. That is why, in God's name, Moses repeatedly demanded freedom from the Israelites so that they may worship me." And he didn't just go before. Now, this is a rabbi that says this, a Jewish rabbi, and I kind of agree with what he says, but he said freedom alone gives license and results in anarchy. In other words, anarchy is your law unto yourself. You don't answer to anybody, and nobody answers to you. You can imagine how the country would be if we were in fact, in 1620, when the Pilgrims came over here, they got a charter for Virginia. Is where they were headed to, and they got blown off course, and they tried to go back, and they blown off course. So they finally figured it was God's will for them to land in Massachusetts. They had no charter for Massachusetts, and they knew that and this is the way I understand it, they knew that if we go ashore, back up just a minute, not everybody on the Mayflower was of that church. The church in Scrooby, England was the one who these members were from that were coming over here, but they had some others that were on the Mayflower as well that were not part of this church. And so the leaders, the Pilgrims, the leaders of the separatist group said, look, if we just go ashore here where there is no charter, nothing to govern us, everybody will be basically a government unto themselves, so we need to come up with something. So that's when they came up with the Mayflower Compact. In other words, there's an agreement between them of what they would do and how they would support each other. And that's what he's talking about here. With just freedom alone and not freedom with some kind of guardrails, it'll devolve into anarchy. Because everybody says, well, I'm free. You can't tell me what to do. So we have to have something to go by. And that's what he said here. That's the reason he's saying, and I kind of agree with this, is the reason every time, he didn't just say, notice God didn't say, Moses, you go in there and you tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And that's what you hear, set my people free. But he says, set my people free so that they may worship, is what he always followed that with. And so they, instead of devolving into anarchy, they're under the lordship of God, and they're following him because they're going to worship him. So, from the perspective of the Torah, how exactly does one worship God? How do you worship God? How do you worship God? What do you call worship? If you had to define worship tonight, how would you define it? Submission. Okay. Praise. Okay. Read the Bible. That can be worship. Any number of things can be worship, can't they? In the Hebrews' mind, and the way that we know, and later on in Exodus and into Leviticus, how are they to worship? What were they to do? Okay. Got another quote here. How exactly does one, that's supposed to be one I got on, worship God? Ritually, of course. In other words, with a ritual. You have a ritual that you do, and that's the way they worship. They had to establish what they had to do in order for them to worship. But especially ethically. That God is primarily worshipped through moral conduct is emphasized repeatedly through the Bible. Deuteronomy 6:18, Isaiah 5:16, Micah 6:8, Jeremiah 9:22 through 23. You can look all those up. The listing of laws directing the Israelites on how to worship God is therefore intended to remind the Israelites they are being liberated from Egypt to serve God. And they established exactly how they were to do that, and what they were supposed, what animals they were supposed to sacrifice, when they were supposed to sacrifice, when they were supposed to have their ceremonies, when they were supposed to work, when they were not supposed to work, and all the different things. Everything was drawn out for them specifically, and you do it this way. In other words, there was not a lot of freedom of worship in that's listed in the Hebrew Bible. In the Hebrew text and the text that we have in the Old Testament in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there's not a lot of freedom in it. You worship, this is the way you worship. This is when you worship. You can worship on your own, but mainly these were set aside times when you would worship, and this is how you worship. Exodus 12:1, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt. This, and I put it under here, almost all the laws of the Torah were given to the children of Israel while they were in the wilderness, except this one. That's what sets this one apart, and it has to do with the Passover. That's the only one that was established while they were in Egypt. The rest of the law was given while they were in the wilderness. So, this month is to be the beginning of months for you. It's the first month of your year. Okay? This is referring, there's 2 New Years for the Jews. I don't know what that was, but there's, the Jews have 2 New Years, and I've got them listed here. One is Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, which is in the month of Tishri. It's in the autumn, where you have Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement during that particular time. And then you have the celebration, which is the beginning of creation. The creation of the world. The other month is Nisan. In the month of Nisan, some say the 14th, some say the 15th, depending on how you count it. Okay, the spring month includes Passover, celebrated at the time of the rebirth, renewal, and so on. Does most every country celebrate the New Year and the beginning of their nation? The United States, for instance, we celebrate New Year, but we also celebrate 4th of July, which is the birth of our nation. That's basically what Israel is doing. This is the birth of your nation. This is the beginning of the year, but they call it 2 New Years. Both of them are called New Years. To give you an idea, I've listed some of them. Out of this group of holidays and commemorations, the first one, Purim, and the last one, Hanukkah, were not given in the book of Exodus and Leviticus. They were not worshipped. This because they came later. Purim came. What's Purim? Does anybody know? No, Purim, what came about because of Esther. It's the celebration of Esther. When Esther basically saved the Jews from annihilation during the Persian Empire is when they started Purim. So that wasn't back in that time. And Hanukkah was started during the time between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And it's the time of the Maccabees is when they had the candle. I mean, they had enough. The story is they had enough olive oil to burn for one day, and it would take that much time for them to create more, but it burned for 8 days. So that's the reason they have the 8 candles. I have a Hanukkah menorah that has the 8 candles and the one taller one in the middle, which is, I forgot what their term is, but it's the lighter candle. It's the one you use to light each one as your celebration goes. So those two are those. So Hanukkah is in December, which is Tevet, and it's Tevet the second. Always the same. It's always the same. The Jewish calendar is the same. It's on the same day every year. Purim is March 25th, which is Adar 14. Then Pesach, which is Passover, is this year is on in 2026 is April 2nd through 10th, which is Nisan 15 or 14, depending on how you look at it, and we won't get into that tonight. But I put it up here as Nisan 15. Shavuot, which is Pentecost, is May the 22nd, which is Sivan 7. Yom Kippur is September the 20th, which is Tishri 10. Rosh Hashanah, September 11th through 13th, Tishri 1. And Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Trumpets, and so on. September 25th through October the 7th, which is Tishri the 15th. Well, actually, the Jewish New Year started last year in 2025 in September, and I think it was the 22nd last year, something like that. But anyway, that's when their New Year, which is Rosh Hashanah, that's when their New Year begins. So you have the beginning of months, which is talking about here, which is Pesach, which is the Passover, is always Nisan the 15th. The Jewish calendar has 12 months. Some of the months have 29 days. Some of the months have 30 days. So every 19 years, I think it is, they have a leap month. They have to add a month to the calendar to get things back on track where they were before. This year, just so happens, April the 2nd through 10th is Passover. Well, I think the 5th is Easter. April 5th, I think, is Easter. So anyway, Easter happens to hit when Passover's going on this year. It normally doesn't happen that way, but it does this year. But they have all these that they have, and you celebrate each one, and it tells you how to celebrate them, and it has it on the same day every year at the same day of the month, where it varies. Their holidays vary on our calendar because they go by a lunar calendar, and we go by a solar calendar, basically, Gregorian calendar. So it's where we have a leap year. Every 4 years we have a leap year. Every 19 years, if I remember correctly, they have a leap month. So if you add an extra month to your year, that would be a little hard for us to get accustomed to. Also, down at the bottom, I put a note. This is the year 5786 on the Hebrew calendar. Why? Why? Rosh Hashanah 2025 began year 5786. This year, Rosh Hashanah will be year 5787. Their calendar is dated, according to Hebrews, that's the day that Adam and Eve were created. So that's where their calendar starts. So according to them, it's been 5,786 years. We don't know, but that's the way they date their calendar. So this is year 5786. So they don't have to do the AD and the BC or the BCE and the CE and all that kind of stuff, because theirs is the same. It's 5786, and then when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, it'll be 5787. So they believe it's been about 6,000 years that man has been on the earth. We're not going to argue over that. Verse 3 says, tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they must each select an animal of the flock according to their father's families, one animal per family. You notice this is on the 10th of the month. When is Passover? 14th or 15th, depending on which way you look at it. So they're supposed to pick out the animal on the 10th, but they're not supposed to sacrifice this animal until Passover. Why would that be? Now, this is an opinion question. My opinion, and the majority opinion, I would say, is you pick them out on the 10th because this animal had to be without blemish. So you had those days between the 10th and the 14th. Actually, it's the 14th is when they did the sacrifice. It's the reason some people say it's the 14th, some people say it's on the 15th. But the sacrifice itself is done on the 14th, even though the 14th is when it's done. And you have to have one that's without blemish. And so the idea or the concept is that you have this period of time where you can examine, make sure you have an animal that's spotless. It must be totally perfect, as perfect as the animal can get. This is another quote from this Jewish rabbi. A purpose of the sacrifice, like the purpose of the plagues, is to teach the Israelites and the Egyptians about God. The lamb was one of many animals worshipped by the Egyptians. The Israelites were therefore instructed to slaughter a god of their oppressors as a way of serving their own God, which was exactly what Moses warned Pharaoh would so infuriate him, the Egyptians, in Exodus 8:22. This is this rabbi's opinion. Whether you agree with it or not, I'm trying to follow the book of Exodus from a standpoint of the way the Hebrews look at it. So that's the reason I'm quoting this particular one. But he says that both of this was for a purpose. The Israelites and the Egyptians were to teach them about God. And they were sacrificing one of the gods of Egypt to show that their God was superior to this God. You have these gods, you have the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh is God. His firstborn just died. How big of a God is he? We're sacrificing one of your gods. How big of a God is that? Fourth verse. If the household is too small for a whole animal, that person and the neighbor nearest his house are to select one based on the combined number of people. You should apportion the animal according to what each will eat. Rabbi Joseph Hertz says this: had a family of 2 or 3 been compelled to take a whole lamb, a considerable quantity would have been wasted. The way we think about Jewish people as being a little tight and thinking about this would be the way that they would think. But it would be wasteful if you have just a couple and you have to sacrifice a whole lamb and consume, because the whole lamb had to be consumed by this family before daybreak the next day, or you had to dispose of it. You had to burn it up and destroy it. So they were allowed to come together. Pardon me? Invite the neighbors. So you had the neighbors come in. You join households together. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male. You may take it from either the sheep or goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. Why did it have to be an animal without blemish? It had to be you're sacrificing to God. So if you're sacrificing to God, what would be human nature? What would be human nature if you had to do a sacrifice every year? You had to sacrifice one of your lambs. What would you do? You'd pick one that was not very good, and it was you get it punitive because you're just fine to get rid of this, and he's probably going to die anyway. So I sacrifice. So what did God do? He told him, you pick out one that's without spot or without blemish. Is what you do, because you're sacrificing this to God, and we're supposed to present our best to God, aren't we? Not our second best. It's supposed to be our best. All this ties in, by the way, with what Jesus did during Passover when he died. According to everything we can determine, what day did he ride into Jerusalem on the Jewish calendar? It was the 10th of Nisan. What day was he sacrificed? On the 14th of Nisan. Is the way we date it. So they selected the lamb on the 10th. They examined him. Remember, they questioned him when he rode into it. They asked him all kind of questions. Finally, he says they quit asking him questions because he got the best of them every time. So he's our Passover lamb. So they picked him out on the 10th and they sacrificed him on the 14th. Sarna, who is a rabbi from many years ago, slaughtering of an animal sacred to the Egyptians was intended to undermine the fear imposed by hundreds of years of Egyptian bondage. Only when the Israelites could bring themselves to sacrifice the gods of their oppressors would they be free to embrace freedom. I like that sentiment. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's the Jewish way of looking at it for many years now. 7th verse. They must take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses where they eat them. They are to eat the meat that night. They should eat it roasted over the fire along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Why unleavened bread? Didn't have time for the yeast to rise, so they had to eat it unleavened. So that's the reason. Initially, you'll find it in the book of Exodus that we're reading here. Initially, and into the book of Leviticus as well. Initially, Passover was this day, and the next day started the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Today, if you talk to a Jewish family, Jewish rabbis, they will say this is the week of Passover. So they celebrate it all together. They are to eat of the meat that night. They should eat it roasted over fire along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in boiling water, but only roasted over fire, its head as well as its legs and inner organs. You must not leave any of it until morning. Any part of it left until morning must be burned. They had to cook the whole thing. No, it would take a while to do that. But they had to cook him completely, and they're barbecuing the lamb. They had no water, and it couldn't be eaten raw. We wouldn't want to eat it raw anyway. And I like stuff barbecued, but that's the way he told them to do. They had to cook it that way, and it had to be cooked, and they had to eat it all in that night. And it says, why did God insist on cooking it? One of the reasons, and I put separation here, the Bible is made up of separations to point out the difference between man and animals. Animals don't wear clothes. We do. I'm glad, personally. Animals don't cook food. We do. How many animals cook food? The only animals that cook food is the animals that we have domesticated, and we cook food and feed it to them cooked. Otherwise, they eat it raw, and it doesn't bother them to eat it raw. So this shows a separation between us and animals. Just like wearing clothes, there's a separation between us and animals. Get somebody who believes in, is atheist and believes in evolution to explain to you how humans got to the point where we had to wear clothes or we'd die of exposure. And see how good they do. I like asking questions people can't answer. Verse 11. Here is how you must eat it. You must be dressed for travel, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in a hurry. It's the Lord's Passover. Why did they have to eat in a hurry? He told them, basically, you're standing up at the table, you're eating, you're all dressed and ready to go, you got your bags packed, and you're eating this Passover. Why? you're going to have to get out of town in a hurry. It's not going to be anything, and a couple of reasons why. 12th verse. I will pass over the land of Egypt on that night and strike every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both people and animals. I am the Lord. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. You think God is nearsighted? Do you think He doesn't know people's hearts? Do you think He couldn't tell which house was His people and which ones weren't? So why did they have to put blood on the doorpost and on the lintel? So they would know. It was an act of faith on their part to do that in order to mark that house so that God would not kill them like He would the firstborn of all the Egyptians. It was all these things, these sacrifices and everything. Later on, you talk about the burnt offering. It said it's a sweet savor unto the Lord. Does burnt meat smell good? No. Well, a burnt offering, you burn it up entirely. And when Mom and Pop's house burned down next door to us, when I step out the door, the scent was terrible, all that burnt stuff. And when they finally just hauled it all off, I was tickled when they came and got everything out of there, because that smell is bad. But God talks about this smell as a sweet smelling savor. It's because you're burning this sacrifice to Him. And so this sacrifice, these celebrations, all these different things we're talking about, and the Passover, the way they had to do the celebration, the way they had to do the Passover was not for God's benefit. They were worshiping God, but it was for their benefit and the benefit of the Egyptians around them. How would you feel if you'd have been an Egyptian and you were sitting over here and you had all these plagues hit you and your neighbors over here, the Hebrews, nothing hits them? Firstborn out of your family dies, everyone in your family, none of those do. Would it begin to get to you? Would you begin to think? So it was for them as well. Pardon me? But yeah, you say, well, we better go see the Hebrews. When somebody says to you that they believe in God, does that mean they believe in the God of the Bible? Not necessarily. They say, for instance, they say the Muslims worship the same God we do. Is that true? They say there's one God, His name is Allah, and His prophet is Muhammad. And you read the God that they worship, and you think, it's not the God I worship. So when somebody says they're God, so I've got some questions here. How will you tell if somebody believes in the God of the Torah, the God of the Bible? How can we tell that? I've got some questions. Do you believe in the God of Israel? That's the first question. Does God you believe in judge the moral behavior of every human being and by the same standards? Do you believe in the God that gave the Ten Commandments? These questions came from a Jew, by the way. But if you ask these questions, all of a sudden you can narrow down whether somebody's talking about the same God you're talking about or not. Does a person have to be a Christian or a Jew to believe in the God of the Torah? But do they have to go by the name of Christian or Jew in order to believe the God of the Torah? You can believe in something and not support it. Well, you don't have to. When were Christians first called Christians? The church at Antioch. So it was a good while afterwards. So you were known by different names. A lot of times I hesitate to use the term Christian because it is collected so much baggage in 2,000 years. And I am a Christian. I'm a believer in the Lord Jesus Christ. But when I'm talking to somebody, I try to say it in a way. I said, I believe in the sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe in the Son of God. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. So I tell them what I believe instead of just giving a title. Because some people that go by the title of Christian don't act much like it. Now, they're not like me, who's perfect all the time and never makes any mistakes and never goofs up. They're not like me. So there's some people that go by the title that don't live it necessarily. If you all believe any of that, I got some land to sell. The blood on the houses where you're staying will be a distinguishing mark for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. You like that song? When I see the blood. Every time I read that scripture, that song goes through my mind. No plague will be among you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. And same thing here. Did God not recognize these? Did he not know who they were? Was that blood for him? That blood was not for God. That was for the people. You notice each one of these things that he tells them to do is an act of faith on their part. When they do this, when they sacrifice this lamb, they're saying, we believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When they're doing that, when they put the blood over there, they're saying, we believe that God said to do this, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we're doing this because it says this. We're sacrificing this animal because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob said. We're doing all these different things. We're doing everything that Moses and Aaron have told us to do because it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Who gave that blood power to protect? It was God. Was it blood was it the blood itself or the confidence in the God who told you to do it? That makes it easy. Verse 14. This day is to be a memorial for you, and you must celebrate it as a festival to your Lord. And this particular author that I was reading this by, who's a Jewish author, he says these are the rememberings that you should remember. He said, remembering, or things about remembering. Remembering endows history with meaning. Remembering enables us to learn from history. Remembering leads to wisdom. Remembering makes moral progress of civilization possible. Remembering links us to the ones who have gone on before. Remembering ensures that the sacrifices of others will not be forgotten. Just like this past week we celebrated Veterans Day. Remembering what, and back in May, Memorial Day, when we remembered the ones that had died for. If you have these things where you remember them, it helps you connect. Remembering ensures that evil will not be forgotten and allowed to disappear. Remembering is the only way to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. Remembering ensures enduring gratitude. So all these things are attached to these. People say, why do you... people have asked me, why do you believe in going to church all the time, every Sunday? I like my Uncle Floyd's answer. He had been worshiping the things of the world for years, and when he became a believer and he turned his life over to the Lord, he was a changed man. If you knew him before and knew him after, he was a changed man. My Uncle Eugene asked him, says, why do you go to church every time the doors are open? Why do you go to church? And Floyd says, I'm afraid not to. That's not a bad reason. He knew that if you get away from this, you're going to drift away from what you know has saved you and made it special. He said, I'm afraid not to. You are to celebrate it throughout your generations as a permanent statute. You must eat unleavened bread for 7 days. I put up 5, but it's 7. On the first day, you must remove yeast from your houses. Whoever eats what is leavened from the first day through the 7th day must be cut off from Israel. You are to hold a sacred assembly on the first day and another sacred assembly on the 7th day. No work may be done on those days except for preparing what people need to eat. You may do only. He says up there, you must eat unleavened bread for 7 days. It said it's a permanent statute. It's something that you need to do every year Why? Because people forget. You got it marked on your calendar. And when you have it marked on your calendar, we celebrate Christmas every year. Why? Because we just like bright lights and Christmas trees and all that kind of stuff. Is that it? We have it as the day that we celebrate. Now, people celebrate it for different reasons. We celebrate Christmas because we're marking the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. What's the odds that Jesus was born on December 25th? It could be, but it could not be. We don't know, and people give reasons. People say, well, it had to be in the spring because of this. You don't know. You don't know. Nobody really knows, but we celebrate it on December the 25th. Why do we do that? Why do we celebrate Easter? Why do we celebrate the things? Why do we set them aside? Why do we come to church? Why do we do those things? Because we believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. We believe in God, and it's good for us to remember. It helps us. It helps keep our faith intact by us doing that. Verse 17. You are to observe the festival of unleavened bread, because on this very day I brought your military divisions out of the land of Egypt. You must observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent statute. You are to eat unleavened bread in the first month, from the evening of the 14th day of the month until the evening of the 21st day. Yeast must not be found in your houses for 7 days. If anyone eats something leavened, that person, whether a resident, alien, or a native of the land, must be cut off from the community of Israel. Do not eat anything leavened. Eat unleavened bread in all your homes. Now think about this. As a Jew, or as anybody, if once a year you have to eat unleavened bread for that whole week, will it help you remember? You'll say, I'll be glad when this is over. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, go select an animal from the flock according to your families and slaughter the Passover animal. Take a cluster of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and brush the lintel and the two doorposts with some of the blood in the basin. None of you may go out the door of his house until morning, when the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the two doorposts. He will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. 24th verse. Keep this command permanently as a statute for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you, as He promised, you are to observe this ceremony. When your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? So what is He telling them? This is passed on from generation to generation to generation. So many times in the Christian world, we forget, because we take it for granted, what we believe, and we forget to pass it on to the next generation and to the next generation and the next generation, and then we wonder why everything falls apart. You are to reply, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, for He passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when He struck the Egyptians, and He spared our homes. So the people knelt low and worshipped. Then the Israelites went and did this. They did just as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. 29th verse. Now at midnight the Lord struck every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn of the livestock. Just think about that. During the night Pharaoh got up, he along with his officials, all his officials, and all the Egyptians, and there was a loud wailing throughout Egypt, because there wasn't a house without someone dead. Now just imagine that, how that would be. How that would be throughout the land. 31st verse, now listen to this. He summoned Moses and Aaron during the night and said, get out immediately from among my people, both you and the Israelites, and go worship the Lord as you have said. Take even your flocks and your herds as you ask, and leave, and also bless me. It's about time, buddy. It's about time. So you have any questions or comments?